All right, it should be recording. Great, so welcome everyone to, again, the NWI Executive Advisory Group webinar. So the advisory group is a great team of individuals who were hand-selected in various supportive roles, and they are, they put together this series of seminars to not just focus on one topic of business, but to help a business holistically. So you will be receiving the slide presentation in a few days from now. You'll get the recorded version. And so feel free to reach out to the board. We've got a lot of great contact information on the webinar that you'll be receiving. And the whole idea of this is to reach out and to network with each other. So don't be shy about that. So, so again, we are going to talk today about grants and funding, and right now especially, and how they can really help you in this very odd situation during these times. And so we have a wonderful speaker, Micki, who will be joining us in just a minute. So what we're doing here today on our agenda, of course, is to just welcome you and give you a little background on our speaker and our group. And then Micki's going to take over and present for us for about 45 minutes. We're going to have question and answer time, but if you're thinking of a question and if you're like me and you don't want to forget it, okay, write it in the chat box. And if that, find your chat feature, because we're going to ask you questions throughout the presentation that you just slip your answers right into the chat feature. And then also too, we're going to talk then about the future webinars and boot camps that we have going on. And we also listed a whole lot of resources for you. And because this is really kind of what we feel is this first step to getting to know you. And we want to present information that really hits home and helps you with your business. And I also want to thank Jenny, my assistant, for putting together all the invitations. And of course, Gwen for putting together these beautiful slides. She always makes me look good. So thank you, Gwen. Great. Okay. We are also very honored to have our special sponsor, IMEC. And actually, right after Micki's presentation, we're going to tell you a little bit more about IMEC and their programs. And they have some great grants as well. Okay. And the board of directors. So let's get right down to Micki. Let me unmute Micki and tell you all about her. So, okay, oops. Interesting, it's not letting me unmute Micki.
There. Is that better?
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do her presentation. I am not qualified. So, okay. So let me tell you a little bit more about Micki Vandeloo. So she's the president of Lakeview Consulting. And Becky, thank you so much for introducing us to Micki. She's an awesome lady. She is the president, like I say again, president of her company, which is Lakeview Consulting. It's a team of about 5 very experienced professionals, and collectively they have hit the $240 million mark in grant funding for both nonprofits and for-profits. And Micki's really gonna, most of you who have called in are for-profit companies. So this will be very pertinent to you. This is way beyond all the PPP loans and things. Micki has 15 years of experience in grant incentives, and the majority of her clients are in manufacturing, but she also works with a technology community, including trade associations, colleges, universities, partnership centers. I know too that she's given me some advice on medical companies. So if you don't fit directly into one of those categories, do not worry, because Micki can find, if there's a grant out there or some funding, she will find it for you. I'm really promising a lot here, Micki. So she just wrote a book too, that is the For-Profit Grant Writing Guide. And she is one of, there's only 150 professional certified grant writers in the US, and she is one of them. So congratulations. And she also sits on the board of the Grant Professional Fund Foundation Board and past president of the St. Louis Grant Foundation Association. And of course, been a mentor to many business owners. as well. So thank you so much, Micki. And I am going to pull up your first slide here so we can get you started. And Micki was going to start us out with a question, right?
Yep, exactly. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm hoping everybody learns a lot about grants today. And I think in this economic time, this is kind of a pertinent topic, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but it's a very pertinent topic because as you may or may not know, if you're a for-profit business, for-profit grant funding funds economic development. And when do we need economic development more than now, right? We need to really spur our economy. So my question for everyone, and if you could just put A, B, or C in the chat box, is how familiar are you with grants for for-profit companies? So A is you don't know a thing about it. B is you know just enough to be dangerous. Or C, I know a lot as I've actually applied for them. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of A's. Few B's. No C's. Okay. So the majority are A's, which is not the least bit uncommon. Oh, there's a C. Marcia said that she has applied for grants and she knows about them. So good for you, Marcia.
Oh,
okay. So our agenda for today is I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to where I am, who we are as Lakeview Consulting. We're going to talk about why manufacturers, educators, telesolutions providers, technology companies, all these areas that we serve at Lakeview Consulting, why do they need grants? What good does it do them? And especially in these economic times, what exactly does a grant do for you? We're going to talk a little bit about why so many companies, and especially in the for-profit arena, don't pursue funding. And I found there's 4 reasons. What grants are available? So I'm going to talk in general, and then I'm going to talk in specific about some COVID grants. I want to let you know that as Noreen said at the beginning of this webinar, if you have any questions either about a specific grant program or anything that I'm talking about, please put the question in the chat box and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And then finally, the most important part, how do you get the money, right? How do you get the grants? So if you could switch us over there. So who are we at Lakeview Consulting? So we have a pretty lofty purpose, ensuring economic prosperity for current and future workers. And I, like many of you, have kids and grandchildren, and I want them to have a country that they feel comfortable with their economic security, okay? I feel there's no better way to do that than to do what we do, which is accelerating growth and innovation by helping the manufacturing community access grants and incentives. And Noreen, I just lost the slides.
Can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Okay. This is where you want music playing. Okay, a little technical difficulty. So
imagine some hold music here, everyone. Okay, now you've started screen sharing. There's your, okay, all the slides are on there. You want to put me in? There you go. That'll work. There we go. So that's okay. Like I was saying, so our mission and vision, really how we're going to achieve that purpose is to provide grant research and writing assistance to the U.S. manufacturing community. Again, if I help one company grow and help them hire people, that makes a more secure future for everybody. So who do we help? Basically what I term all these is the manufacturing for-profit community. So manufacturers, obviously, but educators. Now, you might not think of educators as being in the manufacturing supply chain, but how many of those educators actually provide training to people in manufacturing, and how many provide apprenticeship training for future manufacturing workers? I'm also telesolution providers. So these would be the people that deliver distance learning, telemedicine. I kind of term all of that telesolutions. And then companies in the manufacturing supply chain. So basically, that would be anybody that serves manufacturing. That could be an MEP center like IMEC, and I used to work for IMEC, so I'm very familiar with what you do, and I work with about 10 of their sister centers. But also it might be a marketing company like NWI. It might be a some other type of provider. And Rad Training, Becky's group, she does a lot with the manufacturing community. So any of those companies are also people that we can help. So our background, and I feel it important to talk about this because I'm not blindly going into this business. I spent over a quarter of a century in manufacturing, and that makes me sound really old, but it is the case. I worked in anything from automotive tier 1 suppliers to automation companies. I worked in a steel service center. I worked for IMEC. So I have a lot of experience with manufacturers. And one thing I found when I was working in the manufacturing community, I helped some of my employers get grants. And until I told them about those grants, they knew nothing about them. So when I left the manufacturing sector and knew about grants, I thought that was a great opportunity to start a business, to help connect the manufacturing community with grants, which is a very big education process because, again, a lot of manufacturers don't know about grants. Like Becky said, over $200 million as a team. I myself have gotten about $60 to $80 million in grants for companies in the manufacturing community. The number one goal I have, and this is why I do webinars like this, is to promote awareness of grants to the manufacturing community so they don't leave money on the table. There is no manufacturing leader that I've ever met that said, oh, you know what, I left money on the table. That doesn't bother me at all. Never happens. So our goal is to make sure that they are getting the resources that they need and that they are able to grow because of those resources. Okay. So why do these companies need grants?
Oh my gosh.
And that's okay. So I had a question first. Go ahead and go back. Nope, back. You just saw my whole presentation. There you go.
No surprises.
Yeah. Okay. So why do manufacturers and all these different types of companies need grants? Basically because especially, and this is especially pertinent right now, grants help manufacturers improve their bottom line. And what manufacturer doesn't want to make more money, right? So the way they do that is in 4 different ways. So they can help offset the cost of growth-related initiatives. Those would be things like facilities expansion, purchase of equipment, training employees because of a new product, expanding their markets. So grants can help them offset the cost of those growth initiatives, which also increases their return on investment. So if you have a $500,000 piece of equipment and you get $250,000 in a grant fund, then you are really only spending $250,000 for that equipment. So that immediately reduces by half the amount of time it's going to take you to recoup that investment. So that increases your ROI. We also help companies connect with tax credits, which helps reduce their tax liability. And finally, we can help reduce things like training, research, and development expenses. So if you look at your cash flow statement, right, you have your revenues on top and you have your expenses on the bottom. Your revenues are increased through grants. A grant is a check that goes directly into your revenue stream. If you get a tax credit, that reduces your expenses. So if you increase your revenue and reduce your expenses, and any of you went to any kind of accounting classes, you'll know that the profit is going to get larger. So that's really why companies need to access grants and incentives. Make more money. Okay.
I'm sorry, we just had a little problem with the computer.
There we go. Mm-hmm. So I found 4 categories of people, why people don't pursue funding. And the broadest one was exactly what we saw when we did the initial poll. Most for-profit companies know nothing about grants. They don't know that they exist. They don't feel like they have the time to pursue them, but what they know about them kind of scares them, actually. And so that goes to the second point. So some of them know about grants and they know just enough to know that it's a kind of an intimidating process. It's not easy to find grants. For some reason, the funders make it pretty difficult to find them. There is no one database you can go to. If you've ever been in the nonprofit community, there's a Foundation Center database. That's an enormous database of grants for nonprofit companies. No such database exists for for-profit companies. So you literally have to go looking in several different places. That's an intimidating process for most manufacturers and most for-profit companies. The third is that they've heard about grants, or maybe they knew somebody that got a grant and then lost a portion of the funding. Or there's other misconceptions. You know, when I talk to clients and they tell me, well, I heard of so-and-so and they got a grant for $100,000, but then the government just came and took it away. That really does not happen. What happens is when you submit a grant, it's actually a contract between you and the funder, and you're saying we're going to do certain things with this grant, and because we're doing those things, we're going to hire more people, we're going to invest more money, et cetera, et cetera. You do have to report that. And if at the end of the grant you haven't met the terms of the agreement, the funder has every right to take a portion or all of the grant away from you because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. So what I tell people when they try to tell me about a misconception like this is, well, maybe ask them, did you fall short? You know, did something happen? Because it is very, very rare for a government entity to just come and yank money away in a grant. It doesn't happen, at least not in my experience. It doesn't happen very often. And the fourth category is people that know about it but lack interest in actually pursuing them. I had a company one time and we did a grant and incentive research project, which is typically where we start with our clients. And we got a lot of opportunities for them and we went over them with the company. And at the end of it, one of the guys that we were talking to said, well, this is really great information. I'm really glad you gave us this, but we're not going to pursue any of these. And of course I stopped and said, well, why not? You know, and I was curious. And they're a privately owned company. And the owner of the company felt that, and again, this goes back to these misconceptions, he felt that if he took any kind of grant funding, he was taking money away from more worthy organizations. He was a very community-minded leader, which is wonderful. And you know, what I said in response to that is basically any grant, especially an economic development grant, it's in the budget cycle. It actually has its own pool of money. If you take money out of that pool, you are not robbing from other pools. That doesn't necessarily happen. So I understood what he said, but then sometimes companies just don't want to share financials, which you do have to do when you apply for a grant. So that is another reason why companies might not be interested. Okay. So the next question, and we're full of questions today. What grants are available? So I have a question for you. So go to the next slide, please. So are you or is your company planning any growth-related projects, such as adding jobs, facility expansion, training initiatives in the next 12 months? So I would venture to say that right now in this economy, it might be a little bit, unless you make PPE or Clorox wipes. Yes, we're busting at the seams, or your Amazon. B, we're thinking about it, but we're not quite sure what we're going to do. And then C, no, we plan to stay status quo. We're not going to hire anybody. We're not going to train anybody. We're not going to add any jobs. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to stay the course. Okay, I see a lot of B's. I saw one C and an A. That's good for you, Shalina. It's wonderful. Okay. So I'm seeing quite a mixture there, which I kind of expected to see. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So basically, grants fund all these types of things. So if you said you were thinking about it, or you were busting at the seams, even, you might, at some point when you're busting at the seams, you're going to have to expand. You're going to have to do something, right? So I would even put the A's in this category, that you might be eventually doing job creation, facilities expansion, landfill reduction. So this might be a recycling initiative that you undertake. Increased market. A lot of companies in this latest economic crisis turned into PPE providers and makers of decals that go on grocery store floors, and they use their capabilities to be able to produce things like masks and capes or gowns, for medical people. So they entered new markets, and in many cases right now, there are grants to support the fact that they had to retool to do that. So, and then finally, solutions to pressing needs, which I would place anything that's related to COVID in this category, but also in particular telesolutions. So as you know, if you have kids, they might be remote learning this year. So there had to be a dramatic increase in a very short time of distance learning providers, because quite honestly, it wasn't the norm before, and now it's going to become more the norm. So again, there's a lot more funding that goes into those types of activities, because the government recognizes that there's a national need for it, and somebody's there to meet that need, and they want to fund them. Okay. So what grants are available? And I'm going to talk really generally about grants. Again, if you want to know about any particular grants, please put it in the chat box. But so for manufacturing, training grants is the biggest one. If a manufacturer knows about grants, it's usually training grants, because community colleges, when they work with, they usually have pools of grant money they can use. And when they work with clients, they say, well, you can get half the cost of the training by applying for this grant, and we'll help you apply for it. So usually when I talk to manufacturers, if they've done any grant work, it's been that type of program. But there's also training grants that can go directly to manufacturers. So recycling grants. So I helped a company get a $250,000 grant in Missouri because they have a recycling program. And this company made soap and shampoo bottles out of recycled plastic. So they wanted to recover more of the plastic so they could use more of it to make more bottles. And they needed a machine to do that. And so they got a $250,000 grant for recycling, for a piece of machinery to do that recycling activity. R&D grants. Some manufacturers get R&D tax credits or R&D grants. These would be the very high technology manufacturers. I work with a company in St. Louis that does battery manufacturing, and they do a lot of really innovative type of battery technologies, so they can qualify for R&D grants. And innovation grants, and our folks from IMAC know a lot about this. They've got an innovation voucher program that they run. That is in a lot of the states. Actually, I work all over the country, and a lot of the states are getting more innovation funding. So that's really great. I think that's a wonderful use of grant funds. Educators. So we work a little bit with the education industry, and basically teacher development, research into new and innovative ways to educate, especially again in the COVID era. There's a lot of funding out there to fund research into increasing outcomes from distance learning. For school supplies, sometimes foundations give educators money. Dollar General is an example. Build-A-Bear does a lot of, the Build-A-Bear Foundation does a lot of grants for educators. And then most particularly curriculum development. And in the manufacturing sector, it can be for educators that are implementing apprenticeships, that want to expand apprenticeships. This would be more the higher education type of educators, so community colleges and universities. Telesolution providers. So this has been, like I said, a huge area of funding, particularly for rural areas, because a lot of rural areas don't have sufficient broadband to do distance learning or telemedicine. So USDA, who is the primary funding source for rural activity, actually put out, instead of just one telemedicine and distance learning grant program, they put out 2 this year, which was unprecedented. What we're seeing is that in looking at the proposed budgets for future years, there's going to be a lot more money put into rural activities, because there's a definite need for this broadband assistance. USDA also has a broadband program that's going to have a lot of money put into it. There's also, during COVID, been a lot of state programs with regard to broadband. And then development of online education programs. Finally, technology companies, again, that would be in that SBIR, STTR realm, which is the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. So those fund very high technology research. So they have to have a broad societal impact and technology, what do we call it? Broad societal impact and technological merit, that's it. And then expansion of partnerships with national labs. So a lot of technology companies create a technology and then they don't have a way to commercialize it. So national labs and American Make centers have kind of taken on that role of commercialization and connecting industry to technology. So technology companies can sometimes receive grant money through that. And then if they want to commercialize their technology, there's funding through state and federal sources to do the commercialization. Okay. So one thing that has changed in this COVID landscape is that, you know, I had a team member of mine say, if I hear this is an unprecedented time one more time, I'm going to take somebody and throttle them. And I understand that, but it is truly an unprecedented time in the grant world. It is an ever changing grant landscape right now. So every day there's new sources of funding. Every day there's a new program or a new conversation that turns into a program, or what I liken it to. So everybody now knows about the CARES Act. So it is the funding that came from the federal government and was distributed to states. I don't know if everybody remembers that about 12 years ago, the same thing happened. When we had the recession, there was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And again, it was a huge pool of money that the federal government decided to use to spur the economy, to generate economic growth. The same thing is happening now. So CARES Act funding goes from the federal government to the states, and then the states in turn have either chosen to create their own grant programs, or they've flowed some of the money down to actual counties. So I have a worksheet that I update twice a week, and I publish it on LinkedIn. So please follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in seeing it. But I do a summary, a United States summary of grants related to COVID for businesses and manufacturers. And I do it by state. And I can tell you that there's at least 3 to 4 new funding opportunities every time I update it. And that's every 3 days. So it's coming out that fast. The other thing that's really interesting about the funding that's coming out through COVID is that normally nonprofits get the majority of grant funding. Okay, so most foundations, 99% of foundations historically have given to nonprofits, and even the federal funding has been more geared toward nonprofits. But now what's happening is for-profit companies are becoming eligible for a lot of these grants. So for example, there was a funding program through the Department of Labor to accelerate career pathway development for the manufacturing industry. And as the eligible applicants had to include a manufacturer. So you had to have a consortium of like education providers, economic development, but now they're saying manufacturers need to be involved in that conversation, which is absolutely true, by the way. That is absolutely true. But now they're recognizing it, right? Now they're saying, okay, yeah, we really need to have those people, at the table. So, and even the COVID funding, there's as many business grants as there are nonprofit grants. So every time there's a state program for nonprofits, there's usually a state program for businesses. So I wanted to give a few predictions. I'm publishing an article in Manufacturing Outlook e-magazine, and it's on my predictions. And here's my humble predictions on where funding is going to go. Reshoring is a conversation that's been going on for a long time, excuse me. And now it's becoming a national conversation. It's really come into the spotlight. I believe there's going to be funding to encourage reshoring efforts. I believe there's going to be increased workforce development funding opportunities. And I believe and know that there will be more money put into rural initiatives such as broadband and distance learning and telemedicine, and even other types of like facilities to spur rural growth. So that's my prediction. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, and I saw a question come through the chat about this. How do you access grants? So how do you get this money? So the first thing you need to do is design your project. And this is something we help companies do because it's not always as easy as it sounds. We really recommend a cross-functional team, and have that cross-functional team. It can be somebody from operations, somebody from finances, somebody from engineering, maybe if it's a facilities type thing, or if it's a training program, maybe your HR person. Get that cross-functional team in a room and talk about your project in terms of what activities you'll do. So what activities are you going to do? And then who's going to do those activities? So if it's an installation of equipment, it might be somebody's got to get quotes for the equipment. Somebody's got to spec out the equipment. Somebody's got to plan where it's going to go on the floor. Somebody's got to make sure that the people are trained on the new equipment. So those are activities. Those are the things you're going to do. And then you assign those. You say which group is going to do that. But then you're going to look at the opposite side. So what's going to happen if you train those people? Well, you're going to have people that are more equipped to do work. You're going to have better equipped employees, right? If you put in a new piece of equipment, you'll be able to take on more work. You can increase your sales. You can increase your capacity. You might have to hire people if you put up new equipment. So those are what you call your outcomes. So those are what's going to change as the result of doing that activity. And that, by the way, is what funders fund. Funders fund job creation and expansion of markets and exporting and training, because those are the outcomes they want to see. And then put together a rough budget. It doesn't have to be anything real specific. It doesn't have to be down to the dollar, but how much money are you going to need to do this project? Once you know all that, then you can do research. And like I said, there's no one good database, but grants.gov, if you're looking for federal funding, is the source. It is the one database for federal funding. And then you can look at your state economic development website. So in Illinois, it's the DCO website, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and I think it might be something different now. I don't know. It used to be DCEO. But anyway, you look under Illinois, do a Google search for Illinois, state economic development or something like that, and you'll get their website. You can look in there and see if there are programs. Again, it isn't going to be very obvious. They're not going to say, we're giving away money to do this. You will have to do some digging even on their websites. Then ensure you're eligible. So if the program is for businesses that are under 10 employees and you have 15, you're not eligible to apply for that funding. If, however, that you are eligible, then start looking for, somebody just gave me the website, grants.illinois.gov. Yes, that's a good one. So ensure you're eligible and then look for grants to fund your outcomes. But don't forget about incentives, by the way. A lot of people don't really take the time to look at tax credits. Again, they also impact your bottom line. What I tell manufacturers they are as valuable as grants because they reduce a lot of your expenses. I talked to a company the other day that does a lot of development work, and they found out through a study that they could get $900,000 in tax credits looking back for the last 4 years. Now, that's a huge thing for them. That saves them all that money, and it saves them a ton of money. So then the next step of the process is to actually apply for the grant. You can go ahead and switch it, Noreen. So then you'd write the grant. Again, you go back to that cross-functional team. You can't do it in a vacuum. Be sure to address all the requirements. So read through the RFP very carefully. The RFP is typically the document that will say we're giving out funding for this, and this is how much funding we're giving out. It will say things like you have to have a Times New Roman 12-point font, single spaced, 1-inch margins. They get very detailed. Federal grants get extremely detailed. There can only be so many pages that we will review. Those are all pretty important things to know because, like I tell clients, this is kind of the throwaway pile eligibility type thing. So if a federal reviewer gets a grant that's 18 pages and only 15 pages were allowed, she throws it in a pile. If it has 14-point font and it can only have no more than 12-point font, she throws it in a pile. It just reduces the amount of applications they have to do. So don't give them the opportunity to throw away your grant application. Make sure you understand and address all the requirements. And then ask the funder if you have questions. So these people are there to answer your questions. So if you say, I don't know if I'm eligible, call the contact person for that grant and say, am I eligible? I'm this kind of company and I don't know if I qualify or not. And then finally, don't wait until the last minute to submit. If the grant is due at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, don't submit at 4:55. I worked with a client a few years ago, a community college that had applied for a number of grants, and they at the last minute, like the last 3 days, this person disappeared. She reappeared the day the grant was due and submitted it what she thought was at 4:58 when it was a 5 o'clock deadline, but her clock was off. So she actually submitted it at 5:01 and they did not accept the grant. And 3 months of work had gone absolutely unrecognized, which is really frustrating for me, quite honestly. But it's also, for them, it was really a disappointment. So don't wait until the last minute to submit. So now I'm going to take your questions. So do you want to read me the questions, Noreen, or how do you want to do that? Because I know we've had a few.
Yeah, so I will shoot a few off too. So here's one that says, I'd like to know about grants for healthcare, health and wellness research software solutions. It would be helping a food and beverage manufacturer with product innovation.
Okay. So if I understand it right, you are creating a software that helps them. Oh, here we go. I see it on here. Research software solution helping. Oh, so you're creating a software research software for food and beverage manufacturers. Okay, so here's one thing that I have found is that in the area of apps and software, there aren't a ton of grants. On the federal level, you might be able to propose your solution to a university that helps and has a program that helps food manufacturers. So I talk a lot about partnerships. Partnerships are really important in grants. So in this particular situation, I would actually suggest that you maybe try to partner with a university or partner with an eligible entity, because there are grants for health and wellness solutions, but they don't go necessarily to the companies that are providing that software. They go to people that are using the software and are using it in a certain way. So what I would say is that you could probably, if you partner with a university at the state level, I don't know if that would be under the innovation voucher program. Maybe the person from IMEC could help with that, but I could see that might be something that they could help with. And then if you train people, by the way, on how to use your software solution, you can get training funding, or they can get training funding to offset the cost of the training. That's pretty much the areas that I can think of. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to talk to me more about it, there'd definitely be a way to reach out to me afterwards and I can understand it a lot better.
Yes, we have all, on the slides, you'll have Micki's contact information. So,
yeah, absolutely.
One of the next questions is then, how do grants get audited?
Okay, so that's usually outlined in the request for proposal. They will tell you that there's going to be so many reports that you have to generate. And those reports are usually, so for example, if you say you're going to hire 6 people, you might have to do quarterly or every 6-month reporting during the grant period to say how many people you've hired or how far you've gone towards your outcomes, how much money have you spent on your equipment. What they also encourage you to do is submit invoices to back up that, copies of invoices to back up what you've done, or copies of payroll records to verify that you have hired the people. So there's kind of with for-profit grants, with for-profit grants, there's typically an auditing process that goes on throughout the grant. And it's through those reports. But at the end of the grant, you need to have evidence of everything you've purchased. And that is what gets audited. That is what can get audited. So if you said you did something, if you reported you hired 6 people, like with any other audit, you have to have evidence that you did that. So that's the auditing process. It's not like an IRS audit. And I can't even tell you that some grants never get audited. Some get audited some people get audited with every grant they do. So it's not a given that you're going to be audited, but you're open to it.
In the beginning, they were curious about, so how do you get paid? And the question came up too about, do you take a percentage of the grant as payment, which.
Right. So that's probably the most common question I get, by the way. The answer to the question I take about taking a percentage is no. I don't take a percentage of the fee. If I did, I probably would have been retired about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting model, but the basic fact is that almost no grant funder will give you a grant to support a grant writer. So if you're paying me a fee, when they do audit you, because something like that would trigger an audit that you paid a grant writer, then you will lose the funding because you used it for an unallowable expense. So for that reason, and then also the work that we do, the writing that we do, and the project management that we do get done regardless of whether you get the grant. So what we promise our clients is we're going to give you the most competitive grant application possible with the information that we're given. And that's what you're paying us for. That's what I'm estimating is the amount of work to write that grant. So I get paid a flat fee, usually, for my grants. I also have worked on a retainer basis with a not to exceed. So I can tell a client, I will spend no more than 30 hours writing this grant, but you can just pay me for the hours that I spend. So I am willing to be flexible on the way I charge, but it's based on the work that I do. It's not based on whether or not you get the grant.
Could you give them kind of a range? Like anywhere?
Yeah, so for our grant and incentive research, if it's a standard grant and incentive research process, it's $2,800, $2,800. That's a flat fee and half's due up front, and then it takes about 3 to 4 weeks, and then we request the other half at the end. Grants vary greatly because it just depends on the complexity of the grant. So some of these COVID state grants are literally like filling out an application. There's not a lot of writing to be done, and those are pretty inexpensive, like from $1,000 to maybe $6,000 or $7,000. The next level of complexity is the state grants, maybe training grants where it takes a lot more collection of data and outcome discussion and that type of thing. Those would be between probably $5,000 and $10,000. And then federal grants are much more expensive, but they're also sometimes 40 to 50 pages in length. They take hundreds of hours to write. And those can be anywhere from $9,000 to $20,000. Wow. So the one thing that I'm very cautious of is the proportion of what we charge to what you're going to get from the grant. So if your grant is only going to be $10,000, we're not going to charge $9,000 to write the grant. First of all, if a grant is $10,000, it's going to be a pretty simple application. So the size of the grant and the application complexity are directly proportional.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. So one of the questions was, what are some of the major pitfalls when someone's trying to do the application process themselves?
Not following the directions, not understanding the directions. Also, what I find a lot, especially with technology and even more high technology manufacturers, is talking in plain language. You know things in a certain terminology, but what you really have to be careful of is that you are explaining it in terms that anybody could understand. Because sometimes when these people review these grants, they have no experience in your industry. So part of our job is really to tell that story. It's a story to be told. It's not a technical report on here's what we're going to do, and we're going to use this type of calibration software, and we're going to use this type. They don't want to know all that necessarily. So yeah, it's just sometimes speaking in their language is difficult for people as well.
Okay. So another question then is, it seems like a lot of red tape, and so how do you go through all that? Well, that's one of the benefits of having you go through.
Well, it is, and honestly, the red tape comes with the research process because again, it's what I want to do is find the grants that my clients are going to have the most probability of getting. And by the way, when we do our research, we prioritize on that basis. So I'm not going to take you to a federal grant for the first grant in most cases because it's going to be very complex. It's going to involve conversations with funders. There's a lot of red tape there. We guide you through that. Basically, we help, we tell you this is the next step. I tell people 90% of my job is project management. 5% is writing. It's the writing is the simple part. The hard part is keeping everybody on task, especially if it's a very complex grant, making sure everybody does what they need to do when they need to do it. So, but we guide you through to make sure you don't get caught in that red tape. But if you're doing it and you get caught, then always go back to the contact for the funder. That's the go-to person. If you get confused, it's the program manager. If it's a federal grant or if it's a state grant or something, there's a contact. There's a program manager at the state level.
Okay. You know, I always tell my clients too, is look what you make per hour, especially most of your business owners. And can you really afford, when you start to add up the number of hours that it would take, like Micki showed you, it is so much more economical to give it to you, just like your accounting, give it to the CPA, because they could do it much faster than you. It sounds like a big amount until you start breaking down the amount of hours. And then also look at, you know, what's your ROI from it? So if you're going to get training and you're going to be training 5 new people, and how much production do they create, that it should be like maybe 5 times what the cost is for you and from that grant. So I think people have to look at the whole big picture of
exactly
out of it. Yeah. So good. There's another question about software. So what if the software, if it's for travel or tourism, to help out with social distancing and allowing users to book and fill out paperwork in advance, like at a more digital, platform?
Again, as a provider of the software, you probably can't get money, but I would strongly encourage you to encourage your clients to apply for funding, because it sounds to me like those would be like possibly tourism companies, and there is tourism funding in some of the states. I would also say if this is specific to COVID, some of the COVID grants might be going to municipalities and tourism companies and to encourage tourism. So I would be on the lookout for that. And then they could help fund your software. So you are not probably going to get money to develop the software, but your clients might be able to get money to use it as part of a project that they're doing.
So as part of your service also, there's so many other than tax deductions too. So like I think Chris, who's our IT guy, had said that there were some tax deductions that they could write off the cost of the IT software, but not not the taxes and things on it. So do you also help with that too? Are you knowledgeable about the additional tax deductions if you do this and this? Like for instance, when you pull somebody off of unemployment and you're training them for a new position.
That's workforce opportunity tax credit. Yes, tax credits we do. That's a little different from tax deductions, by the way. So I don't deal with tax deductions. We do deal with tax credits.
Tax credits. Okay, I used the wrong word. So it's tax credits. Okay, fantastic. Then there was one here that someone I know has some background noise.
Please mute your phone.
Double two. Okay, thank you. Let's see, and I think that the other thing, well, again, there's a lot of questions on, okay, how do you get through all the red tape and stuff? Is there an easy kind of do-it-yourself way of doing this? And I think you made it kind of clear that it's you have to follow the same steps as I would if I was trying to do it myself. So it's the same red tape. It's just who's going to deal with it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And there really isn't, I mean, if you look at it very simply, the red tape isn't the issue. It's more just meeting all the funders' guidelines. And maybe that's what they mean by red tape. I mean, there's, you have to pay attention to what they want to see. If you don't, and if you give them information they don't want, they're not going to be happy about that. I see one on do grants cover salaries? In some grants, they do. They can, if it's a capacity building grant, by the way. That's more on the for-profit end. There are some, there are apprenticeship grants through the federal government. And if you have to hire like an apprenticeship manager through that grant to make that grant work, then they will pay for part of that salary. It's usually only salaries that are directly applicable to what the project is that you are proposing. So for example, in the education sector, there are 21st century grants, and they're for after school programs. So if you have to hire staff to man after school programs, they will pay for those salaries of that staff or a portion of the salaries of the staff. It's usually capped at a certain percentage of the grant. It can't be more than a certain percentage of the total grant.
Let's see. How about though for the owners of the if you're the full-time business owner and stuff too, is there anything to support their salaries?
The First of all, I think I saw before that they want to know if there's grants for startup companies. Not typically. What I usually do if a startup company calls me is I'll say, go to the SBA and see if you can get an SBA loan, because if you look at it like a loan, like if you go to a bank for a loan, what do they want to see? They want to see that you have good, strong financials so you can pay back the loan.
Right.
Grant funders are the same way. If you go to them as a brand new business and you don't have any background yet, at all, they more than likely are not going to fund you, because they want to see that you're able to manage the money. They want to see that you have the organizational capacity to spend the money well. If they don't see you as a good fit, they won't fund you. And a lot of times startup companies, for better or for worse, they simply don't have that background. They don't have that history. Now, if a company's been in business for 4 or 5 years and has solid financials, then we can work together and we can do that. I did see one though. I thought I saw another one, but anyway, that's the answer to that about salaries. So no, normally not the person that runs the business, because they aren't going to fund you to run the business. They're going to fund a project that your business does, and they aren't going to necessarily fund you. They're not going to fund, because a CEO or president of a company, me as a company, my writers do a lot of the work. So if my writers propose doing a certain writing project to the government, I'm not going to have a lot of involvement in that. I'm going to be overseeing it. So a funder would look at it in exactly that way. They'd say, what direct involvement is that person going to have in this project? And if they don't have it, they aren't going to get the grant. So.
Right. So I know with a lot of startups, it's almost kind of like it's it's always difficult for them, because they need money to get started, especially the manufacturers are looking to buy the equipment. But a lot of times then they go to the SBA and they have to have 2 years of history. Well, it's like, how do you build 2 years of history when can't even
an egg thing, right?
Machine or the laser cutter or whatever they need, and they feel like it's this revolving circle.
Well, and a lot of times what SBA will counsel people to do is do the friends and family funding, where you go to people that and say, can you kind of bootstrap until I can get going? It is. It's very, very hard. Now, high technology companies are the exception. If you are a very high technology company, and like I said before, it has to be very revolutionary technology, you don't have to have any history. A single person can apply for an SBI or STTR grant, but it's usually a researcher. So, okay.
There was a question too, do you work with any contractors, and are these grants available to them? And I'm guessing, Junior, you're talking about contractors.
Oh, like construction contractors, I'm assuming she's talking about. Yeah. Illinois just had a Build Illinois grant that went to municipalities. Now, it didn't go directly to the construction companies, but obviously if a municipality is going to do some building work and that's going to benefit that construction company. So I have not seen any for contractors, but I can see that they'd be the recipient indirectly of those benefits, because they are going to get business funded by those grants. So that's usually what I see with contractors.
Okay. And then we were talking a little bit yesterday about the TAC
grant. Yeah. So the Trade Adjustment Assistance Center is TAAC. Their website is taacenters.org. taacenters.org. It's the Trade Adjustment and Assistance Act centers. There's one in Illinois and Chicago that covers a region. I always say it's the best kept secret of grants in manufacturing, because very few manufacturers know about them. They've got usually one person that covers several states. So, obviously they don't have the ability to get out and talk to manufacturers a whole lot. So basically it's funding to help companies that have been affected by trade imbalances. They've got an extra level so the way they used to determine this is through drops in revenue and drops in employment. And usually it's over like a 3-month time period over the last, I think it's 2 or 3 years. They actually, those center people, the staff there help you go through this eligibility process. And it's a little bit daunting, but they do help you through every step. They do every single step with you. If you qualify for the grant, then you can get, it varies by size of company, but you can get quite a bit of money to fund external activities. So if you hire Noreen to do marketing and sales to help mitigate the effects of trade, then you would be able to pay for her services. If you were to hire me to write grants, then they would pay for my services. What they won't pay for is anything that you do internally. So they won't pay for equipment, and they won't pay for your people to do things. It has to be a contracted activity. So, but it's a great source of funding. Like I said, the people that work at those centers are very knowledgeable, very helpful.
Right. Yeah, we have had a couple of our clients use that to
Mm-hmm.
pay for their new websites and the marketing that we've done and the sales training.
Right. Right. And that will pay for software that they buy, by the way. So for the
okay.
software providers of the world, that will pay, I believe they'll pay for software. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Let's see if I missed any here. Oh, how long does it usually take?
Oh, that's a great question. I thought I saw that.
Yeah.
So it can take, again, I feel very weaselly when I give these answers, but it can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months to find out if you're going to get a grant. If you get so I'll break it down by the types of grants you can get. Training grants, for example, you can find out very quickly within 1 to 3 weeks if you get a training grant in general, unless they have a monthly review cycle. Some of them do. So then it might be up to a month. If it's a state grant, 1 to 3 months, maybe. Like, so a recycling grant, because usually that has to go in front of a committee and there's an application approval process. Federal grants, it can take anywhere from the least I've ever seen is 2 months. It's been quicker through COVID. The COVID grant funding is getting doled out pretty quickly just because they want to get it spent out. But so that's the exception. But in the federal realm, it can take anywhere from 3 months to 8 or 9 months to find out if you get funding. And usually all that timing is in the RFP. So when you fill out the grant for a federal grant, the good thing is they tell you everything. They tell you when it's due, when they're going to review the applications, and when you're going to be notified. So you know up front. But what I tell companies, especially manufacturers who are looking to do investment, grants will not pay for things you've already done. So if you've already built that building, they're not going to pay for it. So what I tell companies is to look ahead as much as you can. And I'd love to have like 4 to 6 months of notice if I'm going to work with a manufacturer. So, or be willing to be flexible with your timing. Training grants. I've done a lot of training grants for companies, and they're like, well, this training's scheduled to go on August 1st. Well, it might take till August 10th for them to approve the grant, and you can't do the training before the grant. So, I tell companies, be ready to back off that training if that grant hasn't been approved, because they won't fund anything that's already happened. So the exception is USDA. USDA for the programs that I've worked with, you can submit the grant, and then once you've submitted it, you can go ahead and start spending against that project. You just take the chances that you're not going to get it funded. So
great. So Jenny, is there any questions that we missed?
You kind of skipped around, so I don't know for sure. I already have them all copied, and we will send them to Micki, and she can make sure that everybody got their questions answered.
Wonderful.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah. So that's something that we also do for all the attendees, is that Jenny's fabulous. We copy everything in the chat list too. We make sure that we answer all your questions, and then some new websites I've been writing down too, and we want to add those as well. So we have some slides coming up that have some resources for you. And of course, there's Micki's information on the slide deck that you'll receive, and my information, and the team's information as well too. So Micki, you did a great job. So I really appreciate you. So so now let's look at some other things that are coming up to help the companies as well. If I can get my slides to move. Thank you. Here, there's all Micki's information. We're going to talk just a little bit about IMAC, and we have Holly on the line too, and IMAC is one of our sponsors. And So they are the initiate, they are igniting Illinois manufacturing excellence and goal competitiveness. So they've kind of changed what IMEC stands for, and I love it. And especially this diagram, because it shows you all the areas of business that they can assist you in. And Holly, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but I'm find you here so I can unmute you. And I'm going to give you some, Holly, I can't seem to find you. Jenny, if you could walk through the members, the attendees one more time as I tell them a little bit more about IMAC and see if we can find Holly, because I know she was on and then it looked like she got knocked off the system. So, so IMAC then is a team of manufacturing industry specialists, and their goal, of course, is to create this positive future for manufacturers in the state of Illinois. And they do this by accomplishing these three objectives. So it's by connections between leaders, sharing of unbiased content, creating a business, and creating business opportunities for you. They're also strengthening company performance and workforce opportunities through best practice options, and then energizing the manufacturing productivity, growth, and innovation. We're really proud to be part of being a provider for IMAC when it comes to sales training and development, and marketing pieces, everything from websites to SEO to social media. And again, it has been very exciting working with all of you. So thank you. And they too have, in addition to, they work with operations and workforce, customer growth, again, market research, business strategy, and data tracking to measure. They're very big on, in fact, so are we, and I think this is measuring your results and seeing if what we're doing is making a difference, and if not, then we need to change the plan, right? So they strive to be your trusted advisor, and they work to identify solutions to different issues, the issues that keep you awake at night. Their core services are lean and continuous improvement in manufacturing quality, but they also have experts and partners that can address really any need that your business has. They actually helped one of my clients, Simplex, move, you know, figuring out the plan and where they were going to put all their machines, and they did a fabulous job with that. So, and Holly is with us today, and she is on the recognition end of it. So, again, Holly, are you with us? Yes.
I think she left.
Did she? Okay.
Gone. Yeah, I don't see her on the list any longer.
But this, in the program here, what we did is that we did write down that there still is this innovation voucher. And right now, you know, innovation is really key. There's an old saying that if you don't innovate, your company will die. And this is kind of one of those, I don't mean to scare you, but this is one of those times of the year. And on my team, we've added two new partners. That is Dr. Matt Leontine from the University of UIC, Chicago. So his PhD is in supply chain management. He teaches Six Sigma and innovation. And then also Heidi Hettendorf, for many years, she worked internationally for Motorola and some other IT companies as well, but innovation is her key and her key expertise. And so when you're looking at, you know, if your sales are down now, and you know, you need to really look at, okay, what is a hot marketplace? And you might need to either develop either a new product to enter that marketplace, or a new system or process. And so together, what we did is put together this innovative workshop. And actually the BIA is part of this as well, this workshop. And I'm just trying to get this out of the way here. So again, it's the next one, there's one going on right now. Within the next class is October 7th, 14th, and 21st. If you're one of our clients or the BIA or IMAC, then you get special pricing. And it's 3 days from 11 to 1. And again, you receive materials and recordings. So if you miss a date, you can keep up with it or send one of your colleagues. And so what's really neat is that you're with a group of with other business owners building this cohort of finding solutions for you. So creating, again, new capabilities over what you have, uncover opportunities for new products and services and markets, and then accelerating your ideas into workable solutions. And so we meet with you beforehand to really help you figure out, okay, what are we going to work on? And then, of course, do a wrap up at the end. But what I think is really neat is that, and it depends on what you're working on how there is that innovation grant that is not used actually for this part of it, but actually the implementation of the new process. And so we work with IMEC, and actually we're going to pull Micki into the picture as well to see if we can get you as much funding for this new idea as possible. And then, of course, you know, we also too can provide the market research analysis. In fact, through UIC, we have some students that will do it for really, they're going to do it for free, and it's just paying the cost of the supervising instructor and having us analyze it. That is the cost to you. But if you know anything about market research, it costs thousands of dollars to see if that is the marketplace that you should be going after. So that's another you know, connection that we're providing for you as well. So this will be in your slide deck also. And so the next slide here too. So this talks about the voucher for innovation. Okay, so we have a couple more questions for you. Because again, we want to provide information and quality webinars that really meet your needs. So we are holding virtual whiteboard sessions with you and your team, just with, you know, the post-it notes and the whiteboards, but everybody's home and safe. So if you were to join in on a whiteboard session, would you, here are a couple of reasons that might interest you. Would you do it to help you reevaluate your business goals? That would be A. So in the chat box, you would just put A. B would be focus on new products, services, or markets. Okay. C is think through more flexible operating styles. And D is to strengthen your visibility. And E is all of the above. So if you could pop some of those answers in the chat box, give us a little guidance. Well, and it's a message below. So we have an E, a C, which is great, thank you. Another E, a lot of E's. Great, good. Well, we've got our next couple of webinars then planned out for you. But what I like about these whiteboard sessions, they're private, so that, again, you bring your key staff members, depending on what the project is, together, and we help you walk through these problem-solving exercises with our board of advisors. So here's another question for you too. Of course, we want to know, how did you hear about this webinar? So if you could put an A if it was through an email, B if it's through LinkedIn, C for other social media avenues, D for Eventbrite, and E for other. If you could kind of write in what the other is, that'd be fabulous as well. So great. I see a lot of people have received the email. Some people from LinkedIn. Really great. Thank you, because we just want to get the word out there, and you always got to try to find out what works, right? Okay. So we have information here for you, because I know that Micki also mentioned the Small Business Development Center, and of course IMEC. So we've on this slide, you'll see how to get in touch with IMEC. They also have just wonderful webinars too that are I believe they're all free. And then looking at what the VIA has, but you usually need to be a VIA member, which is someone in manufacturing. You can, you know, maybe try one or two of them, just to see if the VIA is a fit for you. This information about the Small Business Development Center is there. And we have free for you this Safe Work Playbook. So when you click on that and download it, I know you've got COVID coming out your ears, but it is just from beginning to end in your business, just some additional COVID safety recommendations are in this book. And that's from Dr. Matt. Then protecting your intellectual property is actually the focus for our next webinar, which is going to be Thursday, September the 3rd, same time from 12 to 1:30. And so Bree Crawford is, IP attorneys, especially good ones, are really hard to find. And so she actually has someone working with her in the entertainment industry. So if you're, producing music or, they can help you to protect that. But we're looking at now too is these new, we're helping come up with these new ideas, should they need to be protected. And what's really neat too is that, and which I can tell you is that, Dr. Matt and Heidi have all produced products that have been patented as well. So she wants to make sure too that if you're going for a patent, that you're following, your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed so that you can actually, receive that patent and your intellectual property is protected as well. So, and then the Innovation Bootcamp is also listed here. So, and okay, then visionary leaders. So we're looking to that during the webinar is to have one of you who owns a business and can tell us a great story about, like for instance, in September, we're talking about intellectual property. Well, even if you have a nightmare story about how you didn't protect your property and how now, in fact, we worked with this one gentleman, believe it or not, he was selling gnomes and he was making, sports gnomes and birthday gnomes and oh my gosh. And, he had them on Amazon and we were helping him market it. And next thing you know, Amazon copied him and they took over his business and he really, lost, it actually put him out of business. So we want to be able to protect you. So the October 8th presentation is on employee engagement. Having your team separated all over, like my team is all virtual and you're keeping them safe. They feel like they're not included. And so we are going to have a couple of different speakers talk about, how do you still keep that morale up and how do you build that team effort and then, and keep these employees because, especially, in manufacturing, if you've got skilled employees, you want to keep them. Now, also, those initiatives that you have are going to attract new people to your company. So it's also getting that word out there. Glenn and I usually produce a career page on our clients' websites, and we talk to them about in social media. Also, talk about and have pictures and interview your employees that are in these engaging employee activities as well. So if you've got, again, if you're a business owner and you'd like to present, and let me tell you, it's also, okay, here's a little bribery. We are going to publicize, again, this like crazy. And so I know many of you, sell your product to other manufacturers or even the end users. So you're going to get a lot of free publicity for doing this for us. Reshoring will be the topic in November. And I think, and we had one of our business owners, Cheryl from Integrity Manufacturing, last week she got 88 calls. She is a woman-owned business, but for products that she used to lose the business overseas, and now many of them are coming back to reshore those products. But if you don't advertise that particular product, it's not on your website or you don't have a flyer on it and your salespeople don't know that you're bringing that, you could do that, you're going to miss out. So look at what you haven't sold in a while because it was being reshored. And then also, maybe that tech grant could help you out along the way. So that's why too, we work with Micki because as we develop marketing and sales strategies, if we can help you get the funding for that, then that's just a win-win. And then lead generation is going to be in December. So, because again, you need to continually be building your leads. Right now, I know it's a tough time and sales is down for a lot of you, but the worst thing that you can do is stop marketing yourself and stop selling. I've been through that recession. And that's actually when I started NWI during that recession. And as a sales trainer, the ones who made it, the companies who made it are the ones who did twice as much work as they usually do. Okay, they were out there and they doubled their efforts. Okay, and here's the other key: they increased their prices instead of bringing the prices down. they brought them up, and people thought, again, if your prices are higher, then it must be a better value. Now, I know, again, in manufacturing, that always doesn't fly that way because the procurement person is looking for the lowest price. But if you're in the service industries, let's talk more about that. And then, of course, we are looking for other wonderful advisors on our team and this board of advisors is really neat because you can also come in a private session with us. And in fact, there's a few people on the line, like Marcia from our textiles, and that happens to be on the line. And she came into one of our meetings with her former president, Dan, and of course, educated us. We want to know about everything that you're doing right, so we can brag about you and teach others from your success. But then we also look at, what are your challenges? Who do you want to meet? They are master connectors, the people that you have seen from in this presentation, and here's their logos. And their contact information is on, I think, slide 2. So tell us, who's your customer and who you're trying to meet. And we have a running bet on who can get that client, the customer, the fastest. So not many people beat me, but once in a while, Chris will beat me, or Ginger. But so we have BLL Research, which is Dr. Matt Leotine's company. Chris from FutureLink IT, again, he's brilliant with any of your IT needs, especially I love him for hooking the CRM systems to the ERP systems that our manufacturers are using. So we can put, marketing and sales together with operations. Lead Like a Pro is Sandra Larkin. She is educating our leaders throughout the company, but we especially brought her in to help with the leaders in sales and marketing and also in the apprenticeship programs, which is RAD training with Rebecca Tate. I'm sorry, I called you by your your maiden name, Durio. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Rebecca designs apprenticeship programs. And so now you have someone who just used to do his job every day, but now he's going to be a journeyman and lead some people and teach. He may not know how. And so Sandra's really great at that, especially he's worked with many, many manufacturers. We have 2 Nexus Communications, where Kim helps with everything from not more than just your basic phone services, but really big on security right now. Wonderful, sign-in and tracking products, visuals like cameras too. Mark is from Porte Brown Services. He is in Washington again because he's our CPA that's keeping us up to date on COVID and the grants. So we actually are starting in our invitations kind of a little newsletter because everything's happening so fast, and that would be from Mark Garganos. Of course, Gwen Griffin Harmon, she's my partner in crime, providing visual marketing pieces from websites to social media, the beautiful graphics, and really getting your message out. Presidio is Ginger Imes, and she has been in the insurance industry for a million years, but she really is great to show you, are you protected? And especially even with the new products and services, and even just this crazy COVID situation, is your company being protected? And again, with all of us, our short conversation is free, it's complimentary. We just really want you to be healthy and growing as a company. So again, we really stand for that. We are committed to working together to bring you insight, solutions, and creative ideas to see all of you through this crisis, and we want to see your business grow. So thank you everyone for attending, for again, IMAC, and for sponsoring it, and of course all of my advisors too, for their efforts, and Micki, you did a fabulous, fabulous job. So if there's any, I don't believe there's any additional questions that we have here. So great. So again, you'll be hearing from my assistant Jenny and myself with lots of goodies, and we would love to have a conversation with you to see how we could assist you. So thank you for attending, and wow, we're done early. So this is great. So thank you everyone for attending and supporting this presentation. So thanks again. You're very welcome. Bye. Thank you. Everyone stay safe and healthy.